G'day, it's Ryan the Lion, and you are here watching Yarn Live with our two special guests for the first of a series for AFQY Women. On my right is Justine, and on her right is Jolie. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment because they're going to share so that you can meet the person, and then we'll get on to what today's purpose is about. So, shall we start with you, Justine?
Why not? So, Justine, I grew up in South Auckland on a farm, one of 6 children. I went to the very now famous Papatoetoe High School. My Instagram title says slave to ski racing daughter, and for a lot of the time that is exactly what I might actually be doing, but for the other periods of time I'm a professional company director and chair of some boards.
Fantastic, and that will lead beautifully into the discussion later of how do you balance being the was it ski driver, ski chauffeur?
Yeah, slave to ski racing daughter.
And chair of Spark and director of a couple of companies. So before we get to that, Jolie, if you could share who you are, we can meet the person.
Hi there, I'm Jolie. I'm one of 3 girls, so the middle of the 3 girls. I grew up, well, all around some of the small towns. My dad moved around a lot when we were younger with jobs, but effectively had the sort of high school years in Auckland at Westlake, and I have 2 kids, so Sam and Emma, who are teenagers, very similar age actually to Justine's daughter, and so used to also being the taxi driver and dealing with the different moods and all the things that go with that. When I'm not working, we spend quite a bit of time in the Coromandel, and we're currently renovating a place there, so that's where we spend a lot of our time with family and friends.
Brilliant. And if I can pass on a tip that I heard my mum say, as soon as we were able to get our driver's license, she pushed us through the learners restricted and helped us get a after-school job to afford our own car.
Don't worry, I'm not doing
She's not slow. You'll see that today.
Yes.
One thing she's not, and that's not slow.
Yeah.
Although she is at the moment. She's got her foot in the car.
Yes. So thank you very much, both of you, for making the time. You know, the roles that you have some of the largest in corporate New Zealand. So your time is precious, and our purpose for today is also precious. So I know it's at both your hearts and a lot of the work that you do, and for everyone to understand. We just had International Women's Day recently, and off the back of that, the results and the feedback from the women that were part of the AFQY Women was that from hearing other stories, there was a lot of inspiration and a lot of change, and women were sharing how they were going to go forward and do things that they'd held themselves back from. And I took this information to Jolie and said, hey, look, now I understand that you two are the CEO and chair pair. What a fantastic way to kick off a series and just continue that going, because with any of these days, they can't just be a day, they have to be every day. Hence, today's story from these two, about these two, is aimed at sharing some stories, experiences, and inspiration so that you, as the audience, be predominantly probably women, but no reason why if you're a man you can't be inspired as well, because it's pretty amazing what we're going to learn about today. I've been doing a little bit of research, as you'd hope and expect, that it can help drive change and shift the needle. My last little comment is, as I put on the AFQY Women event, is that until we no longer need to challenge status quo, we must continue to challenge status quo. Hence, talking to the chair and the CEO of Spark, we both happen to be women. So, shall we start with what was your journey that led you to be here? If we go back to, I'll say at the beginning, when you were a young child, did you say, I want to be a business leader? Or did it happen over time?
Gosh, wouldn't that be amazing if you were a child and said, I want to be a business leader? I was too busy riding my horses on the farm. I wasn't really thinking about what I was going to be doing, quite frankly. What I would say, though, is from a young age, at school, I was never pushed by my parents, but I always seemed to want to do well for them. So, at school, I tried hard to do well and those sorts of things. But I certainly didn't have in mind what I was going to do. And in fact, it wasn't until I was the first one in my family, I'm number 4, the 4th girl. And Dad said, I think you should be going to university, and, I'll help you figure out what course you're going to be doing. And, my 3 sisters had not gone to university, so I was like, oh, okay, Dad, right. So, and off I went, did a BCom, and joined Deloitte from there, became a partner in Deloitte after about 10 years, and then went into the corporate world, and then stepped back from the corporate world, ran some of a couple of businesses with my husband, and then I started on the governance journey as well. So that's kind of a lot of changes, a lot of step outs, kind of doing different things to end up where I am today.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about you, Jolie?
Well, funnily enough, like Justine, I don't think I would have known exactly what a business leader was, but I did have somewhere written down I wanted to be an accountant. I don't know if I knew what that was either, because neither of my parents were.
Who's confessing to that these days?
I know, but I have already, so I think it's worth sharing. So obviously I ticked that off on my on my journey, and then did BCom at Auckland. My parents actually moved to Wellington when I was 17, so I ended up going from sixth forms because that was the deal. I could stay in Auckland and flat if I was at uni. I couldn't if I was at high school. So did that, got in, and then I was at Jolies, and that's where I originally met Justine. And I had about eight years at Jolies. Went to Lion in Australia and had over a decade there, so about 13 years there in different roles. I had my babies there too, so I had Sam and Emma within 16 months apart, my two, so quite close. But that's also where I got, a lot of my commercial experience first off to give me the opportunity to step up to do a finance director / CFO role. And then, decade on, Justine was on the board of Spark, or Telecom as it was then, and she just sent me a text and said, hey, we're looking for a CFO. Are you interested in coming into the process? I happened to be in New Zealand because we were back for Christmas, so I popped in to meet Joe McCollum, and everyone knows him. There's lots of stories were told in that session, and it piqued my interest, and I went into the process. So I guess one of the things from that is having someone who's prepared to sponsor you, put their reputation on the line, because I wasn't from the industry, I wasn't in New Zealand, I wouldn't have been picked up in any search at that point because I actually wasn't necessarily looking here either. But it also takes courage on my side to go, am I going to step out of a job, move the family, step into industry, one of New Zealand's largest publicly listed businesses. And, for me, that was exciting. And it was also where the company was. We were about to go through a huge bout of change. Simon Murder had just come back as CEO. He was building his leadership team around him, and it was an opportunity to really test your mettle, because I really believe in you've got to have conviction in what you have, but you've also got to be always sort of leaning towards something different. How can you actually build those skills, the courage to try that? And unless you're prepared to put yourself out there too, things don't just happen. You've actually got to take a risk with that. So I think that has been a big learning for me over my career, which then led on to having the opportunity to go and lead some of our business units, so building up the sort of P&L accountability, customer, large teams, and then that put me in the best position to be considered the CEO when the opportunity came. So it is a whole series of different experiences, but I think when I think about it, the things that have helped me reflect back, had a great support network, a fantastic husband, who, but whatever that support network is, it doesn't have to be a husband or anything like that, it can be anything. You just got to work out what that is for you personally. I've been prepared to step in, to risk and to put my reputation on the line, work hard, nothing's free in life, you don't get these opportunities, You've actually got to perform, but also have a support network around me beyond just family as well, people who are really invested in you and are prepared to give time, because it's reciprocal. You give time back too, they know that you will do that. So I think they're the things, when I think about the things that have really helped me and I talk to others about and I look to give to help others with, they're the things that have helped me get to where I am now.
And on this note, both of you are working not just in the roles of CEO and chair, but you're doing your own initiatives in terms of helping women step out and make sure that they go and find their lunch, not expect a free lunch. It's on my foot and mouth moments. What I'm trying to say is you're out there putting in effort to help other women and bring them forward. So yourself, Justine, you're a companion of the Order of Merit New Zealand. We work with the Breast Cancer Foundation. And one of the things I really loved when I read up about this was the vision was for 0 deaths for breast cancer. And in my corporate career and in other places, like people talk about suicide rates, they say, oh, let's be realistic, let's go for a 10% reduction. So when I read 0 deaths by breast cancer, that is a concept that was just like, here's someone who's speaking my language. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, look, I think the honour which I got last year was for both women. It was for women and governance. So it was around the work we're doing with the Breast Cancer Foundation, which I've been involved with for 20 years, but I've been chaired for the last 10 years. And the foundation, you know, over that time, we are the biggest advocate in New Zealand for early detection. And over that time, and that is the thing that saves women's lives more than anything else when it comes to breast cancer. And over the last 15 years anyway, we've seen a 34% reduction in mortality. So the thing about my work with the Breast Cancer Foundation is that, you know, I know what we are doing saves lives, so that, you know, personally it's really rewarding. But, you know, it's not my effort. I'm the chair of the board. It's the effort, obviously, of the breast cancer team, the CEO, and the kind of team of 20 people we have. Because we fund a lot of research, we do a lot of advocacy, we do support as well. So we do lots of things around that. But the other thing that that particular award for was the work I've done in terms of promoting women into senior leadership roles and positions. I've been a strong advocate for that for many, many years. And I think, you know, that's, once again, the joy I get from that is actually all those women. I might be the one that says, you know, introduces or says, look, puts, as Jolie says, puts my reputation on the line and say, this is the person I think you need to interview because, you know, they'll be a good hire. But actually the woman has to themselves, you know, take their risk and take their step forward. And so, you know, that actually is you know, I think a testament to them as well. So yeah, I you know, the Champions of Change organisation, which I co-chair at the moment, that is an organisation where 39 of the biggest organisations in New Zealand have come together, where the leaders have said that they'll be held accountable to increase diversity and inclusion, but diversity from both a gender and an ethnicity point of view in the organisations. And we've all signed up to a target of this 40, from a gender perspective, of 40-40-20. So 40 men, 40 women, 40%, and 20 of either. And, you know, the beauty of that is that we just about, as a group, as a champions group, we've just about met those targets across the board, doing much better than any other group statistics, whether you look at, you know, the US, the Australia, or even the NZX. But within that, each company learns from the initiatives of some of the other companies, what they're doing, and we share that, we get together, and it's really powerful because these are CEOs, you know, as I say, the biggest CEOs in New Zealand saying, this is important for our organisations, and we need to make progress, so we need to have some targets, and we'll be measured against those. And we're making, and as a result, making some real difference. So that's rewarding as well. Absolutely. That is amazing. And one of the things I really love about it is the collaboration. So I think back in the old days, I call it the Wolf of Wall Street and the cut and thrust of business, those companies would have all hoarded those secrets and used it for their own success. Right. They would have, yeah. Now you're actually sharing it. Because it's the better of New Zealand.
Yeah, you only get systems change when you have people moving together. And why would you hold on to an idea like that if it's, you know, fundamentally going to make a shift? So we started with gender, but also ethnicity is the next thing we need to really, as most of New Zealanders, needs to actually shift on as well. So it's a focus for us. So I think it also removes you from being isolated, because you can sit there trying to think about how am I going to solve this, and actually it can be just a little nugget you hear in one of the sessions we have. You think, oh, that might work here. So I think it's that encouraging collaboration. It's one of the critical parts of Champions of Change. Yeah, and learning off each other. Yeah, and learning off each other. That's right. That's right.
Now, not to suggest that this has something to do with the collaboration, but being mothers and business people, I saw a great term the other day, the invisible load. A lot of women have asked, how do you balance having children and the career? And there's some stats that you're probably aware of, just to throw in there from some of the articles, around the decline of women's career by percentage, I think of around 30%. This is statistically in general, not any individual. And I think it was 12.5% reduction in salary. So as a man goes over the career and a woman goes over the career, her line's flatter as a result. So how do you balance it? How do you get to be CEO and chair and mum at the same time? There's some secret in there. There's some secret sauce in there.
Well, I think it starts with, and you only realise this later in life, I have to say, that you have to make some choices about what's important to you personally and at the time that you're in. Because when you have small children, it may be very different to older children, how you think about that. My model has been, I've been very lucky, my husband, well, not lucky, fortunate, as a family, we've decided this is how we want to do it. We were living in Australia, so he made the choice to step back when we had Sam, I had about 6 months off, and then he came off, and he has actually been off ever since then, which has helped me have roles that I wanted to have. But that doesn't mean I go, well, I don't want to be involved with my kids' life, because clearly I do. So it's always still a trade-off between the things you want to do. But for me, that has helped support me in terms of having the courage, the support to actually be able to take some of these roles, particularly if there's a load of things, travel, other things. So you still have to be able to sit down though and personally go, if I look ahead in this year, what's really important for me to be at work for, and what do I still want to see? So, when my kids were a bit younger, playing sports, I would just lock out, for example, a session. If I had to go to something at 3 o'clock on Tuesday because that's when the sport was on, I'd go. It doesn't mean I can't do something up later or I won't do it. So making sure that you value that time and find a space for that time as much as you would a meeting or with anyone else. And I think that's a discipline, but it's also a confidence. It also goes with the culture you're working in, because that culture has to support it. And I know not all cultures are like that, but I've been fortunate with the leaders I've had. They're mostly interested in your outcomes and your deliverables, and if you're doing that, then there's flexibility to work. And I think that's an important, and something that's increasingly happened. I think COVID has a real silver lining in regards to the flexibility. It has come even more into workplaces now to give people that chance. It's not just seen as some people sneaking off to do these things, and it's not the culture we should have anyway. But to be the best person or version of yourself at work, you need to also be that best version of yourself at home as well. And we all have trade-offs and times where we feel like we haven't been that. But as a whole, you want to work somewhere where you feel that you can have both.
I think the culture where you work is really important. So if you don't feel you're in that supportive environment, you should actually make the change. That's what I'd say, because you do, to have it all, so to speak, you do need to feel supported both at work and at home. And the other thing I'd just add to that is you really, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help, because if you are doing full-time work or part-time work, and I really encourage anyone that has children, if they want to continue with a career, they need to actually balance both. They don't want to leave it for a long period of time, because the confidence level makes it harder to get back into the workforce. But, if you need help with the cooking, or if you need help with the cleaning, or if you need, you can't do it all. So you have to either ask for help or have that particular support within your network at home. Otherwise, it just doesn't work, and it wouldn't work for either of us. Both of our husbands are just incredibly fantastic, and I also think that's the same for men that have done really well in their careers. I suspect just about all of them have had amazing home support from their wives.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to confess, I'm a little bit envious of your husband. My wife and I.
One thing I would say too is that is our model.
Yeah.
There are lots of other models that work, and it can be extended family, it can be day. So my thing is find out what works for you and your family unit or your group, and then go after that. Because I think it doesn't have to be that dad's at home.
No.
But the other thing I would say about dads at home, the more dads we have going on parental leave, the bigger opportunity it creates for women and their partners to have an opportunity. So as a cultural thing, something I'm very big on in organisations, it's really supported.
Yeah. So on that note, that was, I think, 320 males versus 22,000 females took parental leave last year.
And that makes that is a big thing. It's a big thing.
Guess my brother lives in Sweden, and the mother, father, and grandparents get 500 days off in the first 10 years of a child's life, paid for by the government.
500 each or 500 collective?
500 each. So grandparents have those grandkids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
My brother.
Wow.
My brother
and that
reports
really
back.
changes things, right? Because that changes the whole dynamic, where it becomes actually just social norm and acceptable for the husband to stay at home. you know.
I think you both have also a shared experience of what it's like too. So
Yes,
you walk in
that's
each other's shoes, you know it's like to be like go through, you know it's like to be home.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Often the harder job is the one at home, that's for sure.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, you have to look at some of the colloquialisms, you know, like I joked about it earlier, we were setting up, my wallet, my keys, whatever, I'll be looking around for it, and my wife will say, just having a boys, like, your wallet's in that drawer, your keys are over there, and your things are there, why don't you put them all in the same place every time, and then you wouldn't have to ask me. And I'm like, yes.
Oh, do you have that? I'm sure we don't have that conversation at home.
No.
Just saying, there's
yeah.
a difference between men and women, and that's just one of them.
Yeah. I think me and I will
That's why you need diversity.
Yeah.
That's why you need diversity, because where would you be without that help, and where would...
So let's get on to the areas that a lot of people have asked about, imposter syndrome, resilience, dealing with some of the attitudes and cultural things that we've talked about. And the other one I think we just covered actually was the balancing home and work and being a mother. That's one thing a guy can't do is be a mother.
No.
So looking at imposter syndrome, you may or not, you may have helped other team members through it, but have you got something that you've personally been through you can share with the...
I think early on in my career, and particularly when I was first in leadership roles, and I think back to when I went to Lion in Australia, it's almost 2 decades ago now. When I think about that, there were times when putting your point of view into a room used to take more courage than was really required. So I actually did some work. I've now got some coaching on that to go, well, actually, what's holding me back? When I got to the heart of it, it was about fear of failure. What if it's a dumb idea? What if it's a... And so I got some tips and tricks then around speaking early, actually how do you build on others' ideas? Because what often we can do is we can chuck 20 ideas into the room and we don't actually take the time to build on something, to get a better perspective. So I started to practice more of those things. But again, you know, to work on something like that, you actually got to look in the mirror and say, well, why? And get behind what's holding you back. That's one of the things, I guess, that helped me, but that helped build confidence then, because once you start to do that more, it becomes a habit. You get used to that. Then you go into different environments and you might go into a different working environment. And I've always largely worked in relatively male-oriented organisations, whether that's breweries, whether that's here at Spark. So that is my kind of norm for the environments I'm in. But that also doesn't mean there aren't some great males out there who are peers or leaders who are prepared to help you, mentor you, and create those opportunities as well. And I think you've got to work out your support network at work too. Like, who are your people? That's how I always think about it. Who are your peeps? The ones that you can talk to, the ones that you can test ideas of. And actually, if you share how you're feeling with someone, quite often they've then got skin in the game for the next time, and they might be able to give you feedback after a session to go, hey, you did that really well, but what about, have you thought about? So I think it's that thing of actively working on anything.
Yeah, I'd probably just add to that. I think the confidence, especially with the imposter syndrome, the confidence is key. And so one of the main things I think is, if you're offered a seat at the table, have that courage to sit in that seat. First of all, to sit in the seat. So you sit in the seat, and then you'll build confidence so that you actually own the seat. And I think it's that first initial, will I be good enough? But don't shy away from any small opportunity, because that's a big difference between men and women. The statistic that a man will apply for a job when he ticks like 15% of the criteria. A woman will only apply for that job if she ticks like 90% of the criteria. So that's just innately, one of the main differences between men and women. So we actually have to step into that kind of courage and find, as Jolie gave an example of, she looked at herself and said, okay, how can I take some learnings? How can I get some coaching on this? And so we can't, if we want to step forward, we need to figure out how to do that and then own it.
And I thought that was a great point about coaching, because a lot of people just go, oh, people like Jolie have got there, I must be able to do it myself. I'll just keep soldiering on, and not think that it's okay to get coaching. So I think it's a brilliant point to raise it for everyone to understand. And to your point...
And I still have coaching today. Like I still... Because ultimately, you want people to be able to give you feedback to be able to think about, okay, what's the next thing I'm going after? Because you always want to keep, I'm a person who wants to keep growing. What's the next step change? What do I need to do?
Not going anywhere.
No,
What's she talking about?
not on my watch. In a role.
Oh, what have we just uncovered here? I'll just step out.
Even in a role, you still can be a better version of yourself. And I think that's the thing around how do you keep challenging yourself and how do you show you've actually got a culture of growth, learning, shifting that. And I think the other thing is I don't think anyone's built or made as you're the leader in the box. You've got to add to it through experience and doing things. So you're going to build on that over your career. So to Justine's point, find the things, say yes. I guess that would be my biggest thing is
Say yes. Always
and
say yes.
you then work out how do you get the people around you to help you deliver what you need.
So just as we saw there, I always like to wrap in a rugby analogy somewhere. The traditional CEO-chair relationship, one question is yours like the traditional one or vastly different because you're a woman and traditionally it's usually men? Or is it not? It's an irrelevant question. And second, coming back to the rugby analogy, is it like the selector and the coach or the coach and the captain? Like what are the roles? How do they work together?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, me and Jolie have an excellent relationship, an excellent working relationship, but it's steeped in respect. We have worked together before and we know, I really respect the talent that Jolie has. And I think from a normal board situation, like if you think of the dynamic of any board and CEO and chair, it is really, really important that the board isn't captured by the CEO, i.e. just does whatever the CEO wants. It's really important that there's challenge.
It does not.
It's really important that there is challenge around the board table between directors. There's challenge, but constructive challenge. There's challenge between the CEO, the chair and the CEO. And so you can't be, it's not about us being best mates, but we are, we do like each other and we have a very good relationship, but really based on respect. But it doesn't stop that challenge because then I wouldn't be doing my job.
I would agree that. I think ultimately, you want to create the best solutions for the business and you only get that if you get challenged. There's no point in being in something where it's all just happy and nice, but we're actually not going forward. And so I can't really talk about other CEO and chairs relationships because this is my first CEO role. But when I was CFO, though, I obviously got to see a lot of the board then, and Mark Beast, who was our chair then, had a great relationship with Pete, same sort of thing. Challenge, good mutual respect, and really supportive of career movement. So I think from that point of view, I think I've been, very fortunate.
We've got good cultures, yeah. And I mean, the prior CEO was Simon Luter, and when I was chair, we had a really constructive and good relationship. And I'm great friends with Simon as a result. So I don't know if that really answers the question. One thing I wanted to come back to is there's a lot about me and Jolie being the only chair and the only female chair and CEO of an NZX company. That is obviously that is true, but actually it's even kind of worse than that in the sense that I'm the only female chair of a NZX 10 company, and Jolie is the only female CEO of an NZX 10 company. So the combined is unusual, but also it just shows we've got such a long way to go. We're making great progress on boards and the champions progress I talked about, but in organisations and the talent and the bench rising up to CEO, that pipeline, we've got huge amounts of work to do in New Zealand and continue to do so. And and our companies, it's terrible that we are the only two.
Sophie Maloney, who's recently appointed as CEO of Sky,
is the only other female CEO.
So I think
it's
that in itself is a bit of an indictment on what I'm more encouraged by is the work we see through champions and other things and organisations and the recognition of people coming through. We're creating that pipeline. And if we look at Australia, I think on the ASX has just done a review of this and I think we were number 5 on the Australian ASX because of our representation across not only at a chair but board leadership and we're making them, movement through that. So in our next layer down of our leaders too, we're at 40-40-20. So we've really approached it from, you can have a power gap. So, and what I mean by that is, if you have 30% of your people overall in your organisation are female, so 70 male, and you get to the top and there's only 2% female and you get 98% male, you've got a power gap. If your participation is 30-70 and that runs all the way through, you don't actually have a power gap as such, because you're represented, you've got a participation gap, like you want to have a better gender mix than that. So we've had, as an industry, we've had a participation gap, but we've also had a power gap. What we've worked really hard on first is addressing the power gap, and now we've done that to deliver. Still got more work to do. Now it's about participation. How do we increase that? And that's a long game. That's both working with schools and education around how do we attract more women into STEM and how do we make it attractive to work in an organisation like ours. But it's also around being prepared to move leaders around who may not have the core depth of technology skills, but they are great leaders and they can learn and they can. And so we started to do that with some of our technology teams and things like that, and send some brokers on. So I think you've got to really understand what is your situation to then work out what's the best way to change it in an organisation, because change doesn't happen overnight, but you've got to be very purposeful about what you want to do.
Excellent. So we've got a few questions that are popping up. I've got them here on my
I had to
mobile.
read them because I'm old and I can't see up.
Got them here. But before we do that, we did have a bloke moment question. Jolie and I were talking about it beforehand. We were talking about that power gap. So I thought that would be a good time now to ask you to share your example. So this is the have you had a moment in your career or in life, doesn't necessarily be work related, where some bloke's been a bloke, which is not conducive to where we're trying to go with this.
So linked to having the teenagers and the teenagers learning to drive, we were looking at a car for my son, and I'd actually done the research. So when we went to look at the car yard, I was asking questions, but every answer was going back to my husband and my son. So every time I asked, he'd then respond to them. And of course, my son's grown up in a household where that's probably not how things roll. So he could sort of see he wasn't particularly comfortable. This isn't going to go well. and my husband was even more nervous. So, but what I did is I kept asking this question because he ended up done it. So it's one of those, whether it's an unconscious bias or what it is, it's the assumption that my husband would be the one who would be buying the car. And it's not to say he wasn't buying the car, but it's a really good example of when I'm sitting here asking the questions and I'm like some chop suey. And the worst part was when we left, Sam and I had got out to the car and sat in the car and I could hear him coming across and he said, what's his Mrs. name again? I just topped it off and Gareth and crackers. You didn't hear that, did you? And it's just, it's a small story. So it's not so much a career, because actually in my career generally I've had the odd thing out in trade. But I find my colleagues who work with you are horrified by that, and they quickly position. This is the person who's making the decision about whether you're going to get that loan or not. When I was working in the commercial side of the beer, so you sort of want to make sure you're.
Yeah, I add to that. I was at the first board that I attended for Telecom, which was 9 years ago, and we're quite a new board because we'd split from 4, so we're quite a new board. And it was at the AGM, annual general meeting, and we were all up on stage, and so a lot of suits up on stage, male suits, and there was me, and I had a bright orange jacket. So I was at the AGM. I stood up, I introduced myself, as you do. Then afterwards, there's always the pies and the cups of tea and whatnot. And I was standing with our then chair, Mark the Beast, and this guy comes up, and he was a different generation, but he came up and he said, so whose personal assistant are you? Right to me. And here, nice for you to be here. Who are you looking after? Which of these men are you looking after? Whose personal assistant are you? Well, before, I was in a bright orange jacket. I was pretty hard to miss, but before I could Mark, he was just horrified. And I was like, Justine is a director on our, on our board, and she's just, so, it's just that this guy, whether he saw me or didn't in the meeting, he just his bias, not to be nasty or anything, just his bias was that I was only there because I'd be an assistant, personal assistant, whatever it was. So anyway, we've lived with those, you get those, all through careers.
And in terms of, just had a wee thought, as you say, you get those all through time, etc. Was it worse 10, 20 years ago than it is today?
Oh,
was it sort of the same?
No. Look, I reckon it was definitely worse 10 years ago. I mean, I know when another really tiny example, when I was a partner to Deloitte's one of my clients, I was a partner, the guy knew I was a partner, and he would say, I'd come in to talk to him about something, and he'd say, oh, well, dear, what do you think about, oh, yes, dear. I think it would be a very brave person that would call me dear, in today's terms. I would hope that that kind of language, isn't. I would hope. I mean, there might be still some instances. I do think the generation we're in now, the men we're working with now, are so much more aware and supportive. This is not a woman's issue. Like most of the men we work with, absolutely believe in diversity. Absolutely believe that women have an equal place at the table. So I think it's much better. I hope it is. I hope I'm not wrong on that. Certainly in our organisations it is.
So on to the questions we've got here, and
Sorry.
one, no.
Stop talking.
No, well, I was actually thinking
Probably
whether,
about being a woman.
well, I'm a little bit speechless now because I'm thinking instantly of the former head of the Olympics who said something similar and now doesn't have his job. But I don't think it's that. Oh, that was an interesting stat. On the subject of women speak too much, which is what the head of the Olympics committee said, and now doesn't have his job. And a stat that I read is that women only speak up 33% of the time in a meeting on average, but for the little that they do, they are perceived to be speaking too much. So
I don't like what they say.
You
Too
should
hard
say that they
questions.
contributed significantly more
Yes,
to what they said. But
So was
I like it.
That's what I thought he was going to say.
Yeah.
That should have been the outcome.
No, it's I go back to when I did the No Woman, No Man theme of AFQY back in 2018. So the whole point with the tech industry being 80% male, men couldn't attend the event without being enabled by a woman. Women could attend, so No Woman, No Man. And I was standing there with a bunch of guys at the CIO summit, and one of my mates who's a buffy rugby guy, works in IT sales, and his wife also works in IT. And he turned around and said, well, what do you need this? And I told him a little story and changed the person in the story, which was my mother, the story to his wife. Suddenly he puffed up like we're about to go play rugby. Right, no, okay, right, we're coming. I'll get Marshall to get my ticket. And suddenly he twigged, and it's he talked about awareness, and I think it's that programmed by society type thing.
And there'll always be individuals that are not that are more
Yeah.
personal with that. So I wouldn't want to say that everyone's experiences are the same, because there are some people who have some terrible experiences here that I know of. But I think it is slowly changing.
Now, I just need to do a time check because we're 9 minutes past closing, and you two may have meetings to be at. If it's okay, if you have a couple of minutes. So one question from Sharon Broadbent. So
Hi, Sharon.
So Sharon, I asked.
She asks hard questions. Don't.
Well, you kind of already answered it. I was going to ask it back before when you were talking about it, but the question is, Jolie, Justine, any particular advice for creating and maintaining sustainable high performance in your lead team? So you were talking about the power gap and how you worked on the power gap for your 70-30. So you're sort of in that space.
I think going to the high performance thing, I think, again, when we do so I have roughly 3 strategy offsites with my direct team a year. Alongside that, we will also do, so one day will be strategy, the other day will be work on us as a team. So how we perform as a team. So what it says is the what's important, but the how is a hell of an important too. So how are you investing in yourselves to make sure your lifting capabilities. Sometimes that's around somebody doing some work on design thinking with D-School. One of the beauties of the virtual world now is you don't have to have someone fly over to do that. We can just hook into that. And so I think high-performing teams is all about creating an environment and a culture where people have a voice. Not everyone's the same because you want those different perspectives and skills. And you've got to think quite hard when you're actually creating that team environment around what's missing and what would really add. And sometimes it's the things that challenge you most. Putting that in the room is what gives you a much better answer. So that's how I think about sort of high-performance teams.
But what we do know is that there's not going to be a team ultimately will not be high performing, in my view anyway, if it is a homogenous team.
No.
So it starts with, Jolie has 50% of diversity in her leadership team. So it does start with actually having a diverse team. You're not going to ultimately have a high performing team if no one's challenging each other and everyone thinks the same.
So we've got one here from Lee, and I'm not sure, Lee Harris. So I used to work with Lee at the Target Daily Times. She used to be a journalist. I used to be art director there. So it's more of a rhetorical question, but I think it's going to launch off a bit of discussions. How do men balance their careers and be part of the family? Why are we still needing to ask these questions? We kind of know what we do, but we're still shifting the needle. But I thought it was great she changed it from how do men balance their careers?
Well, I'm a big advocate for that, as you can hear, because I feel like if it was more socially acceptable for more men to take parental leave, and I think that is shifting. I think back to when my husband did it sort of 16 years ago, with that many, or there were a few around, and he was kind of the odd one in the neighbourhood. Now that's not so much, but it puts real emphasis on organisations to make sure that there is a place and a role for that, not just a policy, but it's acceptable. It's not seen as odd that dads might wonder, because that also assumes that they don't want to do that role, and that may well not be the case at all, and they may very well be the best person to be. Yeah.
And I can imagine back then potentially copped a bit of crap from the boys, and just like the example before with Ben, I copped a bit of crap over the No Man. But as soon as I said, they just went, no, we're not, the game's over, we're buying into it. So.
And I think that's the thing about finding your voice too, and I think around the things that you see that are not fair and equitable, and whether that's on panels, for example. We set some rules quite a while ago that we wouldn't have go on. We wouldn't have any of our people go on where there wasn't a good representation. Or you go to an event and suddenly, and it can happen, you go and suddenly you're like, Jesus, there's 2 or 3 women here. What is that about? But then having the courage to talk to organisers about why is that? Because that's not represented in business or where we are. So.
But the answer to that question is reciprocal, really, isn't it? It's not any different, men balancing their careers and women balancing their careers, the answers are the same. It's about support networks, it's about, confidence and encouragement and finding your people, as Jolie described it before. It's reciprocal for men and women.
Yeah. Well, knowing Lee, I recognise she was flipping the script on the question for a reason. The very answer. So then we've got Kelly. So Kelly has got a bit of a message here. It's talking about successful woman, partners, husbands at home. So Kelly's question is around the fact that she's a single mother and doesn't have the support of the husband at home, and having to work harder, getting overlooked because of disability, being a single parent, potentially another bias that people have programmed from the olden days, really. But Kelly's,
it's tougher to find that support, right? So because single parenting or not, and there's a lot of single parents, but it's if your support's not at home with husband, you have to find the support as whether it's daycare or whatever it is. But it's about that flexibility and being with an organisation that encourages and is happy to have that flexibility. So Jolie kind of said before, the great thing about COVID is it really before we were all virtual and people working away from home, the woman that often needed to leave early or needed to was obviously, it's kind of, that's that difficult person that needs to have flexible arrangements. But now men want to do that, so it has changed that dial. So look, I think it's tougher because it's tougher do you find your support when you're a single parent? But to have it all and do it all, you have to find it somehow, because you have to be able to find that balance. But it's not easy, not easy at all. But find an organisation that has the culture that actually will embrace you and support you and will make you inclusive. Because we can complain a lot, but we can all walk with our feet if it's not working for us. And there are organisations, hopefully like Spark and others, that are really working in the space to support you to bring yourself to work, whatever form that might take.
Recognising the strengths that you will bring to the organisation, and that requires a mind shift sometimes. Mindset shift around what is that and in what form. Because there's some fantastic people out there, and I've always found actually when I've had part-time people in my teams or other things like that, they deliver way above what you would expect. So it's really around how do you set it up for success to enable them to be successful. And then as a leader, you've got responsibility to do that.
Well, on that note, I know Kelly, she comes to AFQY. I know she does, I think, from 7 in the morning to 11 at night to 2 kids and a decent job at Westpac. Sorry, that sounded terrible. A big job at Westpac. And I actually asked her the other day, I said, how do you do it? I wasn't even thinking about this interview today.
She's superwoman.
Yeah, which did say 3 hours sleep.
Yeah.
But there's a future leader if you're looking to pull one through. So thank you very much. And our last question before we wrap up, Hiri Tarangi from Wellington. So she says, kia ora, wahine mā. What do you think is the one thing that led you to getting where you are today? So it's a variation or a difference implementing from what I was asking earlier.
One thing is hard. One thing if I think about now, and I think about my children and on what I want to achieve, I've always had parents who they've not pushed me, but they never put any barriers in front of what was possible. As I said, I'm one of 3 girls, so my mum and dad have been hugely supportive of whatever we've done in our lives. And I think that goes a long way to going, you've got to have the gumption and the desire to that, but it also doesn't say you're restricted to this.
The one thing, you need the support, but I think the reason that I'm in my role and consider myself good at my role is probably the risks of being prepared to take, stepping out of industries or jobs to try something else. They've been significant risks, but they've actually added to my overall contribution. So I think, to the earlier point of Jolie, nothing comes without hard work. Hard work's one thing, but you have to take some risks along the way. So the preparedness to take some risks is something that
And also to ask for help. Because we often like to be self-solvers. I've got it, don't worry. I can do this. Personal experience hopping around with my car, so it's like, no, I'm all good, got it. But actually, it's got to be with God sometimes. It's not just always about you.
Well, one of the things I'll just comment on before I hand over to you guys, I'll give you a moment to think about your closing remarks. But the one thing I'd like to comment while you're having to think about that is that met Justine for the first time today, Jolie for the first time at a digital inclusion event. And a little funny story, I got invited as Ryan the Lion to MC a government event, and I actually said, well, how do you want me and not some person in a suit and tie who doesn't have a stupid nickname? Because there's going to be potentially a bit of heckling and we want you. I said, you want to be able to blame me, not be blame yourself. Yep. So I was already prepared to protect all the speakers and take it all on. And first time I met Jolie and I thought to myself, I better actually check what people want to do. And Jolie was like, nah, I was like, then you can do your thing afterwards. And I was just like, and when I met you today, when I did sales training like 20 years ago, we talked about boardroom presence. And you just arrived and you were in the room. And I just recognised from other friends, both male and female, who how to put it right. They can be like wallflowers. It's not that you were being out there going, hey, I'm here at all. But
I was shifting a few chairs around.
You were there. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And you didn't break a sweat, whereas I did. But it's just one thing I just wanted to sort of, after I've done, so they say women speak too much, listen to me, oh, God. So it's anyone can speak too much, and I'm going to believe that often. But what my point is that for anyone out there who's thinking, can I be the next Jolie? Can I be the next Justine? Yes, you can, They've talked about get the support, step forward, say yes, take the action. And that's exactly the first interaction I had with each of them. Was what I saw and picked up on that, is that you are doing that. So now I've given you plenty of time. Closing remarks, and we
I can delegate. I can delegate.
So I guess, if I reflect back when I was a teenager at Auckland Uni doing my commerce degree, would I have imagined I could be the CEO of Spark sort of 30 years later? And I don't think it would have, well, I know it didn't cross my mind then. But what I hope and what I see with the progress that we have, while slow, I think it is shifting a lot. I hope that, and I look at my daughter, and I think there is absolutely every possibility they can have that ambition and desire, and it could come true. So I think for me, it's there are no free lunches. It does come with taking risks, as we talked about. But if you've got that ambition and desire, and you are prepared to work at it and work on yourself, then it's entirely possible. And I think that's what really encourages me and excites me about the journey ahead. Yes, we've still got work to do, but man, we are moving.
Well, Jolie nailed it, so that's no surprise. So I don't have much to add because I agree with all that. One other thing I'd say is be happy in what you do, because if you're happy in your job, you'll be good at it. If you actually don't like your job or you're not happy what you're doing, you're probably never going to be good at it. So if you're not happy what you're doing, change it, because it's hard to be successful if you're not.
Really good advice. And I've been in that role where I wasn't enjoying it. I was terrible at it. And
Yeah.
I went to an interview to get out of it, and the interviewer recognised that they said, so I kind of like you, and you've done some pretty cool things, but I can't put you through as a recruiter. I can't put you through to the interview. You come across terrible at the moment. I think you're just in a bad space. And we got talking about it. So yeah, to your point.
Sort of head, heart, hands. So head sort of, I've got the learning ability, hands to skills, heart, am I passionate about it? If I'm not passionate, that shows up.
Well, that's a beautiful way to close out. So I'll say a very big thank you to you both. And let me say, kia kite.
Yeah.
And by all means, last week, thanks. By all means, keep adding your comments. Share this video. If you've got a friend who you've been speaking to about some of these things, and one of the messages from Justine or Jolie resonates, then share and you can get the message out there, because the aim of these is to give other people inspiration or the answers. Because quite often, like the training example, coaching example, you think, oh, I'm just not getting there. Well, get a coaching. Do what you need to do to make it happen. So,
Bye. Bye-bye.
right.
Have a great day.